Happy Friday, everyone. On today's Locked On NHL, the LA Kings keep their captain for an additional 2 years. We still have some trades floating in the wind, plus the latest on the remaining free agents out there, and a look at which newly drafted players have signed ELCs.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there. Welcome to Locked On NHL for Friday, July 7th. I am Rachel Donner from Locked On Flyers. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here each and every Friday with Gil Martin of Locked On Islanders. You can find him on Twitter at IceWarsNYRBSNYI. Thanks for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. You can subscribe or follow us for free over on YouTube. Run the Sirius XM app. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, you'll get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. How's it going, Gil?
It's going well. How about you?
Going real well. Just want to shout out our new Thursday co-hosts for Locked On NHL, Jay and Hunter, who talked about the winners and losers of free agency on yesterday's show. So check them out as well. In the meantime, we have a little bit of news since then. Anze Kopitar signed or extended his contract with the LA Kings for 2 years, worth $14 million. That is pretty hefty for a person of a certain age, I guess, in the NHL. But you know, he is like, I cannot imagine the LA Kings without Kopitar on it, right?
Yeah, he's the captain. He's the heart and soul of this team, has been for so long, spent his entire career in LA. And, I love the fact that the man can make $7 million a year and it's a pay cut.
Yeah, I know. And it's a 35 plus contract at that.
Yes, little. So go figure. But, realistically, Kopitar, he's played almost 1,300 career games, 2 Stanley Cup wins that he helped this team get to, Lady Bing winner. I mean, you can go up and down the list of accomplishments for Anze Kopitar, but keeping him in a Kings uniform, it just fits.
Yeah, so he still has one more year on his existing contract, but he hadn't earned this extension. I mean, he was their leading scorer this past season. 28 goals, 46 assists. That is not too shabby for an old man in yeah. Hockey terms.
He's not slowing down that much yet. Let's put it that way.
No, and with the Kings in a really good position moving forward in terms of developing their prospects and moving forward in terms of their playoff potential, I think keeping him around is absolutely the right move.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, here's a guy who still plays at a high level, provides you with leadership. He'll mentor some of those younger players and just keep the culture that the LA Kings have developed over the last decade plus going in that organization. So it's a win-win across the board.
Yeah, I think so as well. In the meantime, there's been some trade talk bubbling around the NHL. And as we have found, it is, easier said than done getting some of these big deals done for some big name players. We saw, the Flyers and Blues around the draft trying to get a big trade done that would have involved Kevin Hayes and Travis Sanheim with some huge assets moving around. Didn't happen, wound up just being a smaller deal for just Kevin Hayes. So the fact that DeBrincat is still an Ottawa Senator and Erik Karlsson is still a San Jose Shark, I think, it's not surprising, right? Because it just takes a lot of work, and especially with these big contracts or big potential contracts, right? So on the Alex DeBrincat side, he has said very clearly that he won't sign a long-term deal with the Sens. So they have to say, okay, should we trade him now? or should we try and trade him at trade deadline, which, pros and cons to both, certainly, in terms of what you could get in return. But, with a delay until trade deadline, it would absolutely be a short-term rental because his contract would be up at the end of the season. But at the same time, maybe you want to get as much as you can now for him.
Yeah, and obviously there's also cap implications because he
Yeah.
has a high cap hit. If he's filed for arbitration for this year, so depending on, he's going to get a nice chunk of change this year no matter what. So holding on to him for, let's say, 2/3 or 3/4 of the season has a big effect on your cap. And then any team that's taking him on, if you're going to make a trade now, they're going to want to sign a long-term deal with him because they're not going to want to give up substantial assets for a player who's not going to stay. So there's a lot of balls that are being juggled right now up in the air, and it will get worked out, but it's not necessarily going to be easy. The two teams that are rumored to be most involved in a potential trade are the Red Wings, which is
Right.
his hometown team where he grew up, and the Islanders. Something tells me the Red Wings would be the favorites at this point.
Well, it's a matter of cap space versus no cap space, right? The Isles don't
Yes.
have cap space to do it right now and would have to make a significant deal where, somebody with a big cap hit goes the other way in the trade, right?
Yeah, the rumor is that JG Pajot, who has a $5 million a year cap hit, would likely be included in the deal going the other way. But even that doesn't clear up all the cap space you would need. And remember, during the offseason, you can be 10% above the cap ceiling, but you have to get beneath it by the time the season starts. Still not going to be easy. And the other thing the Islanders don't have is a lot of picks and prospects that might entice Ottawa to want to make a deal now either. All good reasons why I think Detroit is the favorite.
Yeah, I think so too. Although I personally, I always get a little cringe when players go to their hometown teams because I think it's setting people up for a bad situation. I am a firm believer, and you should play geographically as close to home as you can without it being home. Just because I don't know, I feel like there's some bad karma going on there sometimes.
It's either going to be the best thing you ever did or the worst thing you ever did. Very
Exactly.
rarely is it going to be in the middle.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. The John Tavares thing is going to haunt him for the rest of his life, I think. All right. The other big one, of course, is Erik Karlsson, still a San Jose Shark. Right now, the Pens seem to be the team on the table for that. Obviously, the Sharks are going to have to retain salary with that big a contract. It was said around the trade deadline that the Sharks would retain about 30% in any deal, but that's still, a hefty cap hit to take on for 4 more years.
Yeah, and for a player who's on the wrong side of 30 already, you would tend to figure the third and fourth year, especially of that deal, you're going to get diminishing returns statistically. And, an $11.5 million cap hit, which is what he carries right now, even if you take 30% off, you're still like paying a top scoring forward. It's the same sort of a cap hit. You're talking about $8 to $9 million. It's a lot of money.
Yeah, I think, given the risk involved, because Erik Karlsson had the, season of his life, and that's what you're going to be, trading on the value of right now. But at the same time, like, who knows whether that's repeatable, right?
No, but you know what? Even if you get 75% of that production, you're still getting an elite offensive defenseman into your lineup. I doubt he can match that, especially on a team that is concerned about playing defense and is more competitive on looking for a playoff berth. But he'll still be elite even if he doesn't match those numbers.
Yeah, I think so. It's a real interesting situation to keep an eye on, and we will be doing that for sure. The one other trade situation that has come up over the last week or so. John Gibson requesting a trade out of Anaheim. No uncertain terms, has said he will never play a game for the Ducks ever again. Tell us how you really feel, John. But I'll be very interested to see where he goes and what kind of deal would take place. My fear, but gut says maybe he goes to the Devils, because I feel like a goaltender is something that they would need to just take that little additional step forward. But, the Oilers have been in that circumstance as well. The Kings might need a goalie like him, and it would be close to where he currently lives. So that might be convenient. So what do you think?
Yeah, there's a lot of options out there for Gibson. And the other thing that's interesting is the Ducks already have a lot of cap space. And if they trade Gibson, it gives them an opportunity to take on a big contract if they want to go in that direction.
Mhm.
So, all of a sudden the Ducks could really be players, whether it's this offseason or even if we go
At trade
between now and the
deadline.
trade deadline,
Yeah.
they could have a lot to say about where some big names land.
Yeah, I think that is going to be a fascinating thing to watch, especially because I think, the Ducks had a pretty solid draft and free agency on their own, and they seem to be setting themselves up pretty decently. So, again, we'll keep an eye on where Gibson winds up. In the meantime, we have some free agents still available, and we will talk about the top names there coming up next.
But first, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Take your first swing at betting on Major League Baseball on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right, just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you could spend betting on everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to hit the first home run. No matter what team you root for in baseball, head over to FanDuel and check out all the odds and all the different bets that you can make. It's all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on Major League Baseball than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So sign up today. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball.
Gil, there are still some big names on the table in NHL free agency. I think, the one that interests me the most is Vladimir Tarasenko. He just got a new agent in the past week, so I think that complicates things when they're trying to do a reset. And I think, when you get a new agent, they want to kind of assert their dominance and negotiating power around the league. So it's almost like they're doing you must come to me and pay homage, and then we will negotiate from there. I feel like when big names get new agents, that's the kind of process that they go through initially, just to kind of, make a stand and make a statement in the NHL as far as their bargaining power. And I still have no idea where he ends up in all of this.
Yeah, it's wide open where he's going to go. And look, anytime you get a new agent in the picture, it's like they have to justify why you hired
Yes,
them and left your last agent. So the
exactly.
negotiations get a little tougher right off the bat. And it's interesting because Tarasenko, he's not he's not ancient at this point. I mean, he's over 30, but he's not, 37 or 38. Uh, and he had a little bit of a down season with 50 points in 69 games, but he topped 30 goals just a year ago. So you get the feeling he'll land somewhere. And with a shortage of offensive weapons available in free agency at this point, having a legitimate 30-goal guy like Tarasenko out there, his new agent may be able to justify the new contract before all is said and done.
Yeah, I think so. I think that also Tarasenko is going to want to go to a competitive team and a contending team. And a lot of the contending teams don't have the cap space right now because they've sort of locked in their path, and they have their players. So I think that it's going to be an interesting balance as to where he could potentially end up. I think that, the other two big names on the table, but come with extreme high risk, are Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews, the
Yeah.
former Blackhawks. They're coming off their huge contracts that they had with Chicago. And they're both older. I think Toews is 35 and Kane is 34, but so they would be playing on the 35 plus contracts if they sign for more than 1 year. At least Kane would, but both of them have, recent injury history to deal with. And, Patrick Kane, I think, I would say had mixed results with the New York Rangers
Yeah.
after the trade deadline. Flashes of what he can do, but he's very limited right now. He just does not have the speed. And of course, Jonathan Toews has long COVID issues that may or may not resurface, and has been playing on a bad team. Let's be real,
Yeah.
so it's kind of hard to tell like what he is truly capable of at the moment. And, I think it would be wild if they wound up on a team together somewhere on low paying contracts. But what's your take on this?
Well, you could almost, imagine the fire sale. You too can own a part of the Chicago Blackhawks dynasty.
Yeah.
Pick up the Jonathan Toews and the Patrick Kane model. I mean, look, even if you're not getting, and you're definitely not getting these two players in their prime. I mean, Toews was the captain in Chicago for the last decade plus. He certainly can give you some leadership and experience in the right situation. If you're not counting on him to be the guy or even one of the top guys, he can help a contending team. He could be that last piece of the puzzle that puts a team over the top, improves their chemistry, gives them more confidence. The health questions, though, are real, and they're not necessarily going to go away. We still don't know a lot about long COVID and how long it could last. And, Kane, like you said, mixed reviews in New York. I'd love to see them go together, but obviously that's not guaranteed.
Right. I think so as well. There are some other free agents still out there. I think one of the more interesting ones to me is Matt Dumba, because I feel like, and we've talked about this on our Friday show before, Matt Dumba is like the constant conversation. Like, is Matt Dumba going to get traded? What is going to happen here? And then like nothing happens. But now, like, he's gonna sign somewhere. I mean, he's a really good defenseman, and so I think that there are several options out there. I wonder if the Oilers make room for him somehow on their blue line, which has been a perennial problem for them. They have the offense, but they don't have the defense to back it up. That could be a potential landing spot for him.
Yeah, I think that would be a great landing spot for him if they can, find a deal that would fit under their cap. And, for Dumba joining Edmonton, yeah, his offensive numbers have gone down over the last few seasons, but I think by osmosis, his statistics would go up in Edmonton, and he could really solidify that team defensively, because right now he'll still give you 20, 21 minutes a game, and he'll be smart in his own zone, and then any offense you get from him at this point is a bonus. But we know the ability is there, or at least it has been. So I think Edmonton would be a perfect landing spot for him, but they obviously have to make it happen.
Yeah, I think so as well. It's again, he's just one of those guys that I think could make a huge impact on a team without having to pay a ton of money for the services, right?
Yep. Yeah. And then the other player in free agency that I was looking at, goalie Martin Jones, who lost his job in the playoffs in Seattle, but only 33, and in the right situation could certainly help a team in net.
Yeah, I think so. Speaking from experience, having him be the Flyers' backup goalie, there. I think that he's just a real solid backup. You're gonna have to, be prepared for that one soft goal, maybe every other game. He's gonna let one in. But I think that if you have the right offense around him, he has flashes of brilliance and can really be a difference maker in a game.
Yeah, and he's 33. Goalies can certainly play well long past that point in most of their careers. Uh, the thing is, do you think he's going to want a position where he has a chance to start?
I don't think so. I think that he knows his place right now. I
Mhm.
think I just really think, if he's playing 30 games a year, 30 to 35 games a year, that sounds about right.
Yeah, well, if that's his attitude, he should not have too much trouble finding a new home. Kind of surprised he's still out there, though.
Yeah, I think given the goalie needs around the league, I wonder if people are just sort of waiting a little bit on that side of things. Yeah, are there any other free agents that you're surprised are still out there?
Not really. I mean, the other names that are big that are still out there to me are players who are likely to either retire or go back to their old teams. You have Zach Parise from the Islanders, David Krejci, and Patrice Bergeron from the Bruins. You just get the feeling those guys are either going back to their old teams or going to hang it up.
Yeah, I think so too. But we'll see as the rest of the summer progresses. In the meantime, at the other end of the spectrum, we have new draft picks who have signed their entry level contracts. We're going to talk about who has signed, who hasn't signed yet, and why coming up next. So, Gil, just taking a look at the newly drafted players, I think obviously number one on everybody's mind is going to be Connor Bedard, who has not signed his ELC as of yet. And I think like that, could be taking some time for a couple of reasons. Number one, you're allowed to put performance based incentives in the contracts. And so I think that could be under negotiation right now because that's obviously going to make a huge difference for a guy like him with that kind of potential.
Yeah, and unlike a lot of other players drafted in the first round, he's starting the season barring injury
Yeah.
in the NHL. So you don't have to wait, for him to develop. He's going to start. He may not be in his prime right away, but he's going to be in the NHL. And so those incentives really do become more important. And the difference between what he could make without the incentives versus if he meets the incentives could be substantial.
Yeah, I think he can get paid out up to 4.5 million in incentives. So that's a big difference between 950K, which is the max out for the contract itself, right? And the 4.5 million. So that could take some time before a deal is signed there, but I would not be worried about it whatsoever.
No, not yet.
As far as the other top draft picks, Leo Carlson is TBD right now for the Ducks. He plays in the SHL, which is such a great league for player development. I think it's worth waiting and just like really thinking about it. Maybe wait until after rookie camp and see what they want to do there. We did have the third overall pick sign an ELC. Adam Fantilli has signed his deal with Columbus, and I think that's a good move for him. I think there is potential for him to make a team like Columbus, but if they want to let it slide, they could let it slide.
Yeah, and that gives them more options. There are positives and negatives to signing these players so quickly. Obviously, it means that they'll end their ELC sooner and have a chance at free agency sooner. But it also could speed up their development if they're in the right circumstances. So it really does become almost a calculated gamble by management as to how quickly they think these players will be ready and what maximizes their development and potential.
Yeah, I think so. And, obviously there's other factors at hand. So then, in the four slot, we had Will Smith. Well, Will Smith, Ryan Leonard, and Gabe Perreault, all first round draft picks. They're all going to Boston College. So, like, all the NCAA players are off the table. Canucks draft pick Tom Melander is going to Boston University. So I think, you have to take that into consideration that like none of these guys are signing ELCs until next summer at the earliest. And I think that makes perfect sense. They all, are going to grow a lot in their first years in college hockey. David Reinbacher, however, signed his ELC with the Montreal Canadiens. He got the max $950K for his deal. And, he's been playing in Europe. So, of course, it makes sense, I think, for him to sign so that he can come over to North America, whether, he's playing with the Habs or he's on Laval. I think it's the right situation for him.
Yeah, that speeds up the adjustment, the change in style of play, the more physical play, the narrower rinks. That does make a lot of sense. And, Fantilli was playing at Michigan. He signed anyway, but he had already played a year. So,
yes, exactly.
Yeah, there's the difference that you have there.
Yes, exactly. And then we've had a few other guys sign ELCs. We have 2 Nashville Predators draft picks actually signed, Tanner Molendyk and Kalen Lind. And I find the Kalen Lind one interesting just because he was a lower draft pick. But I think that, both of these guys, again, they could let their contracts slide. I think the risk is low here for both of them. Tanner Molendyk got the max $950K as well, which was a little bit of a surprise to me.
A little bit of surprise to me too, but it's interesting because here is Barry Trotz taking over as the GM, and this is one of the first things he's doing. It gives us an early indication of how he's approaching building this team.
Yeah, I think so. And then Andrew Cristall, who is a second-round draft pick for the Washington Capitals, signed his ELC. He's different than Ryan Leonard, who the Caps drafted in the first round, again, going to Boston College, so can't sign him. Andrew Cristall is went through junior hockey. So I think that, it made sense. And Cristall was projected to be a first-round draft pick overall anyway. And so the potential is there. And if he's ready for the pro game, he's ready for the pro game. And the Caps will find that out.
They will. And I still think that was a steal in the second round.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. He was one of the guys that I was hoping the Flyers might take a look at for their later first round draft pick. And so I'm certainly aware of his potential. I think, we haven't had any other sign beyond that, but I'm not sure that I see many more sign in the immediate other than, getting that Connor Bedard contract sorted out, right?
Signed, sealed, and delivered. That's what they're waiting for. And it'll happen. It will happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the bulk of them that will sign will do it around rookie camp. And training camp and, kind of make the decision then on what's best for their development and for the teams overall. But certainly a fun draft class to keep an eye on overall, as we will do over the next year or so and see who makes it to the NHL.
Yeah, this was such a deep draft class, and I guarantee, save this podcast, listen to it in 5-6 years. This draft class will have a huge impact on the NHL.
They will. All right, that will do it for today's show. Thanks once again for making us your first listen today. Gil will be back on Monday talking to hosts from around the league with stories affecting their teams. In the meantime, have a great weekend, everyone.